Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Empty Cloud Monastery for another session of Monk Chat. I always get excited about Monk Chat. It's such a delightful occasion. And I see there's already a few questions typed in. That's great. Gives us a head start. So we'll go ahead and pay homage to the Buddha, and then we'll start going through the questions. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namassami. Okay, so I see there's some questions here already, so let's go ahead and have a look. So Rick says, as a combination of aging and chronic illness, it has become more difficult to take care of my home, dogs, and property. How do we determine when to apply patient endurance towards the strain of maintaining our responsibilities, or when it is time to let go of the meaningful life we have been living? Ayasoma, what do you think?
How to determine when to apply patient endurance towards the strain of maintaining my responsibility? Maybe Bhante J wants to go first.
Oh, but the next question is targeted to Bhante J.
Ah, okay.
Well, technically not. Anybody could answer it.
Well, maybe we can all share
one?
some.
Okay.
So how do we determine when to apply patient endurance toward the strain of maintaining our responsibilities when it's time to let go? So, this is something that all of us eventually will have to deal with, whether from some kind of, physical issues or just old age, right? That there will come a time where we are going to have to let go of doing a lot of the things that we'd love to do. You kind of get a little glimpse of that when you become a monastic, right? Because you let go of, not driving anymore and not doing various things that most people quite enjoy doing. And so, Rick, with your case kind of being by yourself and all that, it's one of those things where you need to be honest with yourself, right? How much longer can you keep kind of maintaining everything by yourself? And when will you need to, think about your options of, moving into a different mode of life, right? A different place and things like that. So I think it's really about being honest and sincere about, your situation and what's really needed in that situation. And then, once you do that, once you investigate that and really come to a conclusion, and then you move forward with, what you think you need to do. This is one of the things that, on the one hand, the Buddha says that, be an island unto yourself, but on the other hand, we're not really islands, right? Be an island unto yourself means, something a little bit different than, if you need help from people to do basic living, basic things of living. So that's what I would say. Be honest and sincere. And, even if it's something that you don't like, recognize that, right? Like what we tend to do is we tend to lie to ourselves, and try to avoid truths that are coming down the pike. This is why none of us actually practices reflecting on old age, sickness, and death, right? Well, I mean, us Buddhists might, but the average person doesn't, right? So don't be like that, right? Really understand things as they are and then make decisions as you need to from that.
I'd also add to that changing your mode of living doesn't mean that you have to let go of having a meaningful life. It just means that you need to learn how to bring meaning to your new mode of life. So for example, even if you wind up living in, say, an assisted care facility, well, then you can make that meaningful by bringing joy to the other people living in that facility. Be kind to the other people who need a lot of attention and care and maybe are quite depressed about their situation. Well, you can find ways to make them happy, to care about them. Be kind and attentive to your caregivers. So if you're living in a nursing home, well, then be kind to your nurses, to the lovely people who take care of you every day. So you can bring meaning to any situation in life. So you may get to a point where your health reaches the point where you need to give up the way you've been living. But that doesn't mean you need to give up having a meaningful life. It just means you need to learn how to bring meaning to whatever lifestyle you wind up in. Okay. And Julie says, in one of Bhante J's videos, he talks about how he studied the, quote, Banga, quote. I assume you mean the Vibhanga, to learn about the precepts in detail before ordaining. Could you tell us about this resource, how to spell it, where to find it? So it's called the Vibhanga, Vibhanga, and it's hundreds and hundreds of pages in the Vinaya Pitaka, which goes into excruciating detail about the rules for bhikkhus and bhikkhunis. That said, I'll be perfectly honest with you. If you just read through it on your own, you're probably not going to understand most of it. These are things which, if you don't discuss them with people who have been living these precepts for years, then it's very easy to get very weird ideas. So I had also studied the bhikkhu rules in detail before I ever met a bhikkhu. And then when I did, I remember going like, oh, what are you doing? Ah, what is that? Ah, what are you doing? And I would ask questions and they would be like, whatever made you think that was breaking the precepts? And I was like, well, but I read in the book such and such. And they're like, yeah, that doesn't apply. And then they would explain to me how I had misinterpreted things. So it's fine to read the analysis of the monastic rules ahead of time. Just accept that you're probably going to misinterpret and misunderstand a fair amount of the material. And until you start living with bhikkhus and bhikkhunis and observing their life and asking questions, until that point, you're not really going to understand the details of these rules. The best you can get is kind of a general overall sense of things, in my opinion, anyway.
Well, I actually did not study the Vibhanga in detail before ordaining. Actually, what I did was I went through all the precepts the time beforehand, just to go like, is this doable or not? And also, what am I getting into? Like, if I actually am going forth. So I just wanted to get a kind of general idea, but not really delve deeply into the nuts and bolts, precisely because I already understood that I would have not understood much about the precepts prior to actually practicing the precepts, if that makes sense. So it's good to have a general idea of what one needs to do, and then study it while one is practicing it and matching it with having the conversation with other monastics as well. It is true that obviously I took a novice ordination ahead of time, so that gave me 2 years to study all the Bhikkhuni Vinaya. So reading the Bhikkhuni precepts, of course, was done before the novice ordination, and then while I was practicing TEP precepts as a novice, then I had the opportunity to learn, etc. But you're already, even though you don't have formally all the precepts as a novice, you're already expected to basically, essentially practice them. At least this is what we were doing here. And then you take them formally, so you know exactly what you're doing. So there's lots of value actually in the different stages that we have. Also kind of prepared in Western monasteries, where you have some time to understand the nuts and bolts of the Vinaya, but also practicing it.
And Julie also says, as I am meditating, I am experiencing more paranormal experiences. I find I am liking this, fearing it, and getting distracted from meditation practice. Any advice? So I'm actually going to refer to Master Sheng Yan on this one. Master Sheng Yan gave one of the best and clearest instructions around this. So he said there's basically two kinds of paranormal experiences during meditation. So the first are kinds where it's just imagination. It's just delusion or confusion or spaciness or imagination. So it's not real. It's just an illusion. And the other thing is where you actually do start having genuine paranormal experiences during meditation. So he said the first kind, where it's just illusory, you should just disregard it and keep doing your meditation. Don't get wrapped up in it. Just keep doing your meditation. And it'll go away eventually. And he said, but on the other hand, if you're actually having real paranormal experiences during meditation, then you should disregard it and keep doing your meditation, and it will go away eventually. In other words, don't get wrapped up in these things. They're just distractions. They're not special. They're not important. If you chase that rabbit hole, you're just going to wind up wasting a tremendous amount of time and possibly going crazy. So it's really not worth it. So Buddhism is not about becoming special or extraordinary. It's actually becoming intimately familiar with the ordinariness of life. And in so doing, then you discover a deep wisdom. But we're not trying to talk to devas. We're not trying to see other worlds. We're not trying to become telepathic or any of that. Sometimes those things happen as a side effect of practice, but it's really not something we're trying to do. And if you find yourself starting to get wrapped up in these things, then you're just going to get way off track. It's really not worth it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, if it gets increasingly distracting, then you might need to go and talk to a meditation teacher around these things. And they might have you change your meditation technique. They might have you change your routine. They might actually commonly, they'll have you do less meditation and more physical activity. That's a very common thing if someone's getting wrapped up in paranormal experiences. Less meditation, more physical activity. That can help quite a bit. Bhavani says, what is meant by Nibbante Dira in chanting? It's from Ratana Sutta?
It sounds familiar.
Nibbante Dira, Ratana Sutta. Nibbante Dirang. So Nibbante is the verb form of Nibbana. And Dira means one who is steadfast. It also has the meaning of someone who is wise. So the wise, steadfast ones attain Nibbana. That's briefly what it means. Yeah. Took me a moment to remember where that was from. Jake says, I am a beginning meditator and new Buddhist. Welcome. Since I began my practice, I've struggled with watching my breath without applying control to my breathing. As I tried to apply mindfulness, I quickly noticed tension in my abdomen, diaphragm, or increased airflow through my nostrils, depending on where in my body I tried to be mindful of my breathing. My breaths become obviously forced and unnatural. What can I do to help let go of this almost unconscious controlling effort and simply observe without interference? One of you like to talk about this?
I can, one of the things that I noticed in my early days is that quite literally, and I can't speak for everybody. And in my own conditions, breathing is always, allergies and stuff. I can remember being a little kid, struggling to get a breath, right? So what I noticed was in my meditation, and this took me years to figure out, but what I noticed is even when I didn't think I was controlling the breath, I was controlling the breath. And when I first experienced me having absolutely no control over the breath, it was a very deep, amazing experience for me. And that was a realization, so this is what it's like to not control the breath, right? So for me, I noticed there's a lot of control of the breath, even when I'm trying not to. Right. And so this is not something that you should get wrapped up in trying to do something about, because if you're trying to oh, I'm controlling. I shouldn't be controlling. Let me stop controlling. And that usually makes it worse. So what I would suggest, what I did, is observe the controlling, right? Really understand what is going on with the breath. Why am I controlling it? Trying to observe the mind states related to wanting to control the breath. And worse comes to worse, sometimes if you have anxieties and neuroses around the breath, sometimes it helps to actually just go away from the breath for a little bit, right? Practice satipatthana, bring your awareness to your body. And that will oftentimes kind of calm your breath, and then you can go back to it after that. Yeah, but what you're experiencing is normal. You're experiencing that we control everything. Literally, we try to control everything. You observe your mind, you will see that we try to control, because we want to make reality what it is not. We want to make reality what we want it to be.
Okay. And Richard says, I would like to begin walking meditation in addition to my daily sitting meditation practice. Due to my ongoing illness and lack of energy strength, I spend most of my time indoors and in bed. What would be the best way to get started? How long should I walk? And would meditation object choices be the same as sitting?
See you. Well, I would say, first of all, Richard, that it's a very good idea to start a walking meditation practice, and especially since you have lack of energy and strength and ongoing illness, which I'm very sorry to hear about. Actually, walking meditation is a really great way to incorporate, even just as simple as that, some physical activity. If you're in bed all the time, because literally walking meditation is not meant to be like a high energy, like big intensive activity where you're going to get really fatigued. What I really love is actually, for example, the mantra that Thich Nhat Hanh invites us to reflect upon when doing practice like walking meditation. So no coming, no going. Recently my mom was visiting here, and she's not a Buddhist, and it was her first time doing walking meditation. So we were doing it as a group, and we usually take a sort of path, a little stretch, and we go back and forth. And so she went back and forth once, and then she was going away, and I'm like, Mom, where are you going? And she's like, yeah, I'm done. I did it already. I'm like, that's not the point. The point is not to just go back and forth and that's it. Like, we're not really trying to go anywhere, like physically. And it's so interesting how the mind works, right? We're used to walk with a kind of destination. We're doing something to accomplish. Yeah, like, where are you going, or like what type of route are you walking, or there's so many different reasons that we do walking meditation, and it's very difficult actually to walk with that sense of no coming, no going, to literally be present while being in activity. So it's it's not a strenuous activity. But it's definitely an activity that can support your physical well-being and your mental well-being. And your mental well-being then will also support your physical well-being. So I would say, how long should I walk? I would say maybe start for a short period of time, 5 to 10 minutes. And it depends on what kind of meditation objects you're using in your sitting meditation. Some can be transferred easily to walking meditation. For example, mantra meditation. If you are using a mantra in your sitting meditation, then definitely you can also use it in walking meditation. As a matter of fact, actually, the Forest Masters, all their biographies, they're very much present with the sort of mantra Buddho, Buddho, Buddho that they would keep for pretty much everything that they were doing, any sort of activity. Breath meditation is also something that Many people do both sitting and walking, but many people find it challenging. Many people find it useful. So it really depends also on whether it's something that supports your practice or not. The elements meditation definitely has been one of my favorites. The 4 elements actually is one of my favorite meditation practices, and definitely it complements actually whenever we do sitting meditation and walking meditation, contemplating the elements. It's very, very useful. So yeah, start in short amounts and then extend it. See how well it supports your practice.
And TJ says, Bhante J, how was San Francisco? Would you talk more about your experience of meeting Bhante Analayo? What makes him such a great scholar? Would you recommend some of his books that you like?
San Francisco was very good. I got to spend 5 days in a tent. It was nice and cool out there. And I was able to be part of the group of bhikkhus and bhikkhunis that brought 2 more bhikkhunis into the world. So that was always nice.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Yeah. And in terms of Bhante Analayo, so I got to spend 2 days with Bhante Analayo when I was a Samanera. So we're talking about, almost 7 years ago. He came to Bhavana Society. He had just been in Germany, spending a couple of years taking care of his parents. And after that was done, his sister took over, and he came to America, and he would eventually go to where he is now, up in Barre, IMS in Massachusetts. And so he came to pay respects to Bhante Ji. And I was a Samanera at the time, as I said, and he came in the door, and I came and I went to greet him, and I bowed and paid respects. And he looked at me and he says, well, we didn't ask how many vasa we have already. And I said, Bhante, I'm a Samanera. And he says, well, you could have stolen my chance to pay respects or something like that. The first thing I met him, the first thing he cracks a little joke. And then I said, well, Bhante, you missed puja. And he goes, oh, we missed puja? Great. Right. And so my impression was of Bhante Analayo was he's this German monk. So he's probably going to be kind of gruff and serious and things like that. And right off the bat, he's like cracking jokes and I was able to, he gave us a couple hours to talk to him, and it was really important. He gave me some pieces of advice that I still think about to this day. Like, for instance, I was kind of like, I was a Samanera, and I started teaching at the retreats at Bhavana. I'm like, Bhante, I don't feel like I'm ready to do this. What, and he looked at me and he says, well, we all have our own karmic trajectory. Right? And I think about that a lot. I think about his words a lot there. And so the reason why to me Bhante Analayo is tops is because he met all the markers that I look at people to in terms of somebody who is an actual somebody who's experienced and developed wisdom on the path, right? Not taking themselves too seriously, kind of just being light in the world. And he was that. He was very light, very kind. And I got the impression that he is one of those rare monks that basically does 2 things, right? He writes his books. He's probably up to like 300 now or something. He's written a crazy number of books, and he meditates, right? Like I don't believe that he probably does much of anything else but those, right? He doesn't teach retreats, but maybe once a year. He doesn't really get involved with people too much, like emails and things like that. So I came away with a very, very good impression, and an impression that he is a very serious meditator and a serious scholar, right? This is somebody who's very smart, knows many languages, and is very important in terms of early Buddhist texts, right? And the study and the development and understanding. And so for me, he's like tops, but I consider him to be part of my monastic group that I kind of look at, right? In terms of when I need to kind of like see what their perspective is on what I'm studying, right? Other people in that group are Bhante Sujato and Ajahn Brahmali, obviously Bhante G, people like that. So, but Bhante Analayo was quite impressive to me. And what I recommend, I would definitely recommend his 2 books on Satipatthana, for sure. Yeah, if you've never read anything of his, definitely read the 2 books on Satipatthana.
Okay, and Anonymous says, for Sudaso, what are your methods to get rid of thoughts in meditation? Well, first off, just a side point. So whenever speaking to or referring to a monastic, you should always use a title. So you would never say Soma, Sudaso, Jayasara. You would always say Aya Soma, Bhante Sudaso, and so on, or Venerable, or something along those lines. Just a point of Buddhist etiquette. What is my method to get rid of thoughts in meditation? Well, I don't. Because if you're trying to get rid of them, then that means you're reacting to them, and that means you're under their control. So my approach to thoughts is I just don't care about them at all. And so I just treat them like I'm overhearing a conversation that doesn't involve me. And in that way, then it doesn't distract me from my meditation at all. It's just every now and then the mind makes a little bit of noise in the background. But as long as I don't get involved in that noise, then it doesn't disturb my meditation. And in time, it goes away on its own. So that's the approach I most commonly use these days. Jay Lyles asks, is the cessation of perception and feeling an important event in the process of liberation? Ayasoma?
Well, my understanding is that, it's useful, but not fundamental. So yeah, it's a pleasant abiding. It's great. But one can be liberated without necessarily experiencing the formless attainments. Is that correct?
Yeah.
It's always good to double check with other venerables, our understanding of the Dhamma.
And Kumu says, from a practical point of view, what is the main difference between the breath meditation, Anapanasati, and when the same is done as the Satipatthana meditation, Kayanupassana? So the Anapanasati instructions have 16 steps, which give a complete path of samatha and vipassana, leading all the way to full awakening. Whereas the breath meditation listed in the Satipatthana Sutta only includes the first 4 of those 16 steps and is included specifically as a way of bringing mindfulness to one's body. So in my mind, that is actually quite a big difference. So the first 4 steps are focused purely on samatha, whereas the vipassana elements of Anapanasati are later on in the 16-step process. So if one is just doing the first 4 steps, that's a way of bringing mindfulness and serenity through focusing on the body. But it does not incorporate the vipassana practices, which are in the 16-step Anapanasati. So I was actually never much interested in the 4-step version that we find in the Satipatthana Sutta, but the 16-step instructions that we find in the Anapanasati Sutta and elsewhere, those are actually really good. I really like those. And Asereiko asks, has anyone reached states of jhana? Can someone please share how this experience has impacted your lives?
Well, we have precepts where we can't share. We can't answer precisely these questions. Otherwise, then you would be giving more donations to the monastics that have received it and not monastics who don't, attain things. So the Buddha was very wise, and he kind of, created conditions so that all the offerings to the Sangha go to the Sangha, not to the individual monastics, and not that we play these, games as lay people, like, hey, this is more merit, this is less merit, and so forth. But in brief, to answer your question indirectly, you should actually not indirectly, to answer your question directly, you should actually just find out yourself, go practice concentration meditation, and then you can tell. You're a lay person, so you can share how it has impacted your life.
Yeah, commonly what monks will do is we'll talk about samadhi in more general terms, and we'll talk about how practicing samadhi can radically alter the experience of your mind. But if you directly ask a monk, have you reached jhana? Then they will usually give you an evasive non-answer, because that's what our rules require of us.
And that goes for all stages of awakening too.
Yeah. So if you directly ask a monk, have you attained a stage of awakening? Then they will give you an evasive non-answer. Rick asks, what are ways respectful lay practitioners can be easier to teach and less demanding of generous Dhamma teachers? What do you think?
Didn't we cover that yesterday? I mean, I guess we could talk about it again, but I thought, what was it? And I said, first is to be easy to admonish, right? Okay, so respectful lay practitioners can be easier to teach and less demanding of generous Dhamma teachers. So yeah, well, being easy to teach means what? It means that you have patience, you're able and willing to listen, right? To have endurance, to really try to really understand and maybe even put into practice before you start asking questions, right? Like rapid firing questions is actually not always a good thing. It could be a very intellectual like trap of a thing, right? So sometimes it's good to actually put things into practice first. And then as you put things into practice, then actual questions arise. And then you can ask the Dhamma teacher. And it's also always important to understand that if that monastic or teacher is engaging with you in this way, they're probably also engaging with many, many people. So, I would say, at least give them a week or two to have if it's an email, to have an email response. What happens with me, if people email me, especially if it's a TLDR, it's like 4 or 5 paragraphs or more, I was like, okay, I have to I might take a week or 2 weeks to actually mindfully respond to something like this, because I am trying to give the person, the best of what I can give them. So yeah, just be respectful of the person's time, and don't overly rely on them. Put things into practice yourself. Try to answer your own questions, right? Try to do what you call it? Trying to think of the word. Track and adjust. No, I can't remember the word. But anyway, where you test things and then you realize it doesn't work and then you try something else. I'm trying to the basic wording. But anyway, yeah. So I guess that's what I would say.
I'd also add to that, check to see if your questions are ones that the monks get all the time and have answered 1 million times in recorded Dhamma teachings in the past. There's a few questions which get asked over and over again. Mm-hmm. So sometimes you can find your answers are already there if you look around a little bit. And Hasanta says, thanks for your teaching on Ugga. Can someone of one level teach someone who then achieves a higher level? For example, a Sotapanna teaching someone who becomes an Agami from that teaching. Yes, that is possible. Because what determines the stage of awakening somebody reaches is their own practice. So 2 people can hear the same teaching about anatta, and one of them practices deeply and becomes a Sotapanna. Somebody else practices even more deeply and becomes an Agami, a non-returner. And the person giving the teaching might be neither of those. They might actually just be a scholar who doesn't really practice anything, but they're delivering the information, which is just what the listeners needed to hear. So yeah, it's not strictly necessary to find someone of a higher attainment than you in order to make progress. And Mike has a question. When I mow the lawn, I have a difficult time. I know I'm killing millions of beings, bugs, little frogs, spiders, etc. I know I kill while driving and many other actions as well, but with mowing, the killing is very close and visceral. Does this create negative karma? My intent, of course, is not to kill, but I still feel terrible.
Well, I'm not quite sure. Does mowing the lawn kill millions of beings like bugs, frogs, and spiders? I mean, they're pretty big animals. I remember when I was mowing the lawn, but we never had one of those like gas motor destroying everything lawnmowers. So we had actually a push mower, I remember, in Rockaway. Was it already incredible if it actually cut the grass? So I would suggest maybe downgrade to a push mower so you can actually see everything. Now we have an electric mower, and I remember I had used it when I was still a sommelier. But still, it wasn't like that beast. So I don't remember having that perception that you're sharing, but maybe the other monastics. I also did not grow up like in a place where that had lawns, so the lawn is something bit of a recent experience. This being said, yes, karma is intention. So if you see the sentient beings being killed, or if you have like actual proof that that is killing the sentient beings, yeah, I'd rather, I would say no. Avoid it, absolutely. But you know, if it's just a suspicion, so we have to also be careful with how the mind starts thinking. Well, we have to also understand that it's our condition as humans to kill things. Like, we're constantly killing things. We can't avoid it. It's just the nature of being alive. So we can prevent intentional killing. So we can prevent whatever we have in that moment when we have an option. But living a life of, you know, pushing too much of the extreme, we're actually getting into Jainism, where actually that's their sort of way of going about life. So they will have all the different cloth that, for example, they would put on the mouth so that they don't inadvertently ingest different sentient beings, or they like sweep the floor before walking, so just in case, you know, there are bugs that go through, etc. So yeah, that's not really what the Buddha taught. So I would say being careful is a good thing. Being mindful is a good thing. Being paranoid is a different thing. So don't be too paranoid and do your best. Do your best. Understanding that, yeah, that's also why we're kind of ending this birth and death, so that we don't have to live this kind of mediocre state of existence where inevitably we're harming people just by breathing. You know, like, it's actually like, it really sucks, you know, to have a body on so many different levels. So understanding that, we do our best with the conditions that we have right now to end this constant cycle of birth and death.
Okay. And Yankee says, is it possible to have an unconditioned thought? If not, wouldn't reaching Nibbana be the result of conditions outside of ourselves, causing us to act a certain way, thereby leading us to the exit? Okay, Jay?
I can't speak for a being who has parinibbana, but what I would say, from my understanding of things, is that no, it's not possible to have an unconditioned thought. Right? Everything that's arising in your mind is arising from some cause and condition, one way or another. Especially as an unawakened being in the body. No, I mean, everything is sankhara. Everything is conditioned, except for nibbana. So yeah, no, it would not be possible to have an unconditioned thought.
That said, you still make choices in every moment. So although those choices are affected by external conditions, you still make choices. And it's those choices which either point you towards Nibbana or away from Nibbana. So attaining awakening is not a passive process of just waiting around for it to happen on its own. You'll just be waiting for literally forever. You actually do have to make choices which point you in that direction. Otherwise, you'll just keep going in circles for eternity.
And even those choices are also conditioned in one way or another. But yeah.
Yep. And Manal says, how to apply the Dhamma when one is caretaker of animals, specifically dogs? Would it be improper to give a vegetarian-based diet to our household dog? We too are vegetarian.
I think there's continuing.
However, we also understand the nutritional complexities with feeding animals meat for their long-term benefits. This is challenging to understand. Ayasona.
Well, Bhante is passing it on to me because I'm kind of like the official caretaker of the monastic cat, the monastery cat called Stan. And actually, it's interesting because throughout the years we've had, so Empty Cloud Monastery is officially a vegetarian monastery. And throughout the years, we've had different people who are either vegan or vegetarian who would, like really try to suggest somewhat kindly, somewhat sometimes forcefully that the cat should switch to a vegan diet. And apparently there is a bunch of vegan cat products available out there, and the different people were also like very willing to offer all those different vegan cat food. And I reflected on it and I thought, I don't know about this. Cats are carnivores. So I don't know much about dogs because I didn't have to go through that predicament, but I'll share you my line of thinking. And I was like, all right, so cats are carnivores. If, technically, like, we have deer here at Empty Cloud and they eat like the trunks of the trees and they eat grass and whatever, all that stuff that they eat. And technically I could eat that too. Like it will actually go through my digestive system and maybe I might get a bunch of nutrients perhaps here and there. But will they actually support my body since I'm an omnivore and I don't have the digestive system of a deer? Probably not. Would I want that to happen to me right now? No. In the future? No. Will it sustain my spiritual practice? Will it create certain diseases? Most likely. It will create diseases and not support my spiritual practice. So I thought, yeah, I think that the bad karma of serving the cat vegan food, species inappropriate food, I think would be stronger than the bad karma of serving him species appropriate food, if that is bad karma. So I'll take on that karma, I'll take that on my bad karma that at least only harms me and not harms also the other sentient being. So yeah, I can decide. I can try my best with the choices as an honest mendicant when I have a choice to make the least harmful choice. But when we start taking care of others, either we don't take care of them altogether, or we should make choices that are in their best interest rather than in the interest of our particular ideology, because we're literally like, sentient being, our monastic cat can't say like, I want this, or I don't want that, or I prefer this diet or that other diet, or I have this stance. Like, I'm in the really inconvenient position of having to make those choices. And so, yeah, that comes with a bunch of karma.
And Jaykala says, I've watched Ajahn Pasano's answer to the Thai forest chitta question. I agree very much with the sentiment. Still, I wonder though, do you see the original intention to be semi-eternalist, or to take Nibbana to be an existent non-temporal dimension in opposition to an existent samsara? How do you interpret the original meaning of this teaching? To be honest, I just don't think about it because I'm interested in learning what the Buddha meant by the word chitta and what the Buddha meant by the word nibbana. And I do that by studying the early Buddhist teachings in the suttas. So if somebody after the Buddha uses these words in a different way, well, I'm not really interested in speculating what they mean by that. I'm interested in studying what the Buddha meant by these words and why the Buddha was using these words in that way, and how the Buddha's teachings about chitta and nibbana help us to attain awakening. That's what's relevant to me. So I'm not really interested in speculating about what contemporary teachers might have been by their own rewriting of the meaning of different Pali words. It's just, to me, that's just a huge waste of time. I'm just not going to go there. Bill Stewart asks, what are the hierarchies in Buddhism? Someone want to take this one?
Well, this is one of my favorite topics, actually. And I also gave a talk a while back that is on our channel on Buddhist hierarchies, and actually also for Anukampa Bhikkhuni project recently. So there's lots. I can't, I recommend checking out that talk. That's it.
Oh, okay.
Yasoma's mom is hilarious.
It's true, she is. Did you meet her?
Oh, I think I mentioned her with the walking meditation. Yeah. My mom is pretty interesting, pretty sassy also.
Unfiltered. She's unfiltered. So J-Lal says, can one cause healing of illness or injury in another by directing metta at them? In my opinion, yes, but I also recommend medical treatment.
Maybe about the
Bente, did you have
Injury?
anything?
Well, yes, for both illness and injury. Oh, the healing of. Oh, okay, never mind. Okay, I I was like, wait a second, they're
first.
using metta for it to cause injury.
Me too. I had read that as well, and I was like, wait, that's a first.
Oh yeah. No, I don't have anything. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Andrea says, what is the practice of appropriate attention for beginners?
I'm assuming Yoniso Manasikara here. What do you think? Or
Probably.
Is it just, yeah. Okay. So appropriate attention, and I don't know if you mean Yoniso Manasikara, but this word is pointing towards really understanding and observing something, the root of something, right? The origin of something. So appropriate attention is training your mind to observe how things are arising, right? Bringing your mind to something that is happening in your experience. And this might, some people call this, this is being mindful. Right? A lot of people use a lot of different English words, and there's lots of, things flown around here. But this is why I always like to go have an anchor, a Pali word as an anchor. So if you're starting out, try to train your mind to be inquisitive of what you're experiencing. Always observing, what am I experiencing? You train yourself by just throughout the day, even maybe you have to set an alarm on your clock, just to stop, just to pause. What's going on in my mind and body right now? All right, I can feel a pain in my back right now, and my mind is feeling kind of agitated because of that, or my depressive cycle has come around again, and I can, feel that. These kind of things, right? You training your mind to always be inquisitive and investigating what is happening to you, what you are experiencing. So it would be a good thing, maybe like the last minute of every hour, right? Just to spend a minute. Set your alarm or whatever. Just spend a minute, just bringing your attention and your focus to what's happening in this mind and body. And then after you do that, after a while, you will really be able to start to observe things as they arise and understand why things arise. Why am I so agitated right now? Right? Why do I have this pain right now? Why do I have this pleasant feeling right now? Right? The Buddha wants us to observe how things arise, persist for a time, and then cease. This is one of the ways that the Buddha points to us to be able to see things as they are. And it all starts with training the mind. Right? The Pali word sati means mindfulness, but it also means recollection. So what this means is that you have to train your mind to remember. Right? If you train your mind to be mindful, and this takes years, but once you do it, it's like you kind of have like a shadow that's always just hanging out. Like your mindfulness, the part of your mind that wants to investigate and to see things is always right there. And even when you're not mindful, sometimes it goes, well, wait a second, we should be mindful now. And then mindfulness kicks in, right? And so when you train your mind to be inquisitive and investigative and observe things, then your mind will become your best friend and fellow investigator and will want to observe and to see things. And then you will very naturally, with not much effort, in the beginning feels like lots of effort to apply appropriate attention. But after you've trained it enough, it's no effort. It just happens automatically. Even when you don't even necessarily are thinking to do it, it will happen.
And Deos says, I would ask about two connected issues I see quite a few people struggle with. First is the idea that you shouldn't control anything and just let things happen, and that any kind of control is wrong. But that is wrong, for we can direct affect the mind and potentially to a massive degree. Second issue ties to this, and it's the issue of anatta versus control versus responsibility of our actions. How to explain to someone that we make choices and that we are owners of our actions with anatta, and that we can make choices even without a self, without needing self. Ayasama.
Okay, it's a lot of different parts. So the first part is the idea that you shouldn't control anything and just let things happen. I'm not quite sure where you got that, but maybe I'm assuming that has to do with perhaps in meditation practice, one of the encouragements is to watch what is going on. So let things to a certain degree maybe happen and observe them. So in order, for example, to clean the room, right, or to do anything, to observe if the plumber wants to come to the house or to the monastery to fix a pipe, it's not that he's just going to come and fix it. Like he's going to turn the water on and see where the water is going, how it's flowing, if there's a leak here, or if there's the leak here, if it's affecting another pipe there, right? He wants to have, they want to have like a general kind of idea of the situation. So kind of let things happen and then fix it. So it's the same thing when we first start familiarizing ourselves with the mind in meditation practice. At the very beginning, we think we know what's going on, but actually we're completely clueless because we never really are with the experience itself. So we train ourselves to be with the experience. We train ourselves to actually understand even what pain is, how physical pain is different from mental suffering. We start understanding how it is constantly changing, how it manifests, how it shows up, how we even have an option, a choice in acting upon it or not acting upon it. So all of that preliminary work needs to be done in order to make the appropriate choice. Because usually what happens is that we're completely unclear with completely confused with what is going on. And we think we are not making any choices, but we're actually still making choices. And they're the bad choices that we've made over and over and over and over again, which lead to suffering, right? So we slow down the process a little bit. We understand it, we look at it, and then we figure out, oh, wow, actually, I had a choice all around. I did not know this. And then we're like, oh, look at me, making the bad choice again. Whoopsie. And then we're like, oh, I made the bad choice again. And then we're like, how about I make a new choice? And we're like, ooh, new choice. Oh, wow, this actually has a nicer feeling. This is great. Actually doesn't lead me to desperation and depression and discontent. Let me do more of that other choice. That's pretty great. Oh, look, how much happier I am right now, right? So we are making choices. So then this is tied out to anatta. Well, anatta does not mean that there is no self, like that we don't exist. So the Buddha is actually quite clear in the Kaccanagotta Sutta. We tend to, as unenlightened beings who don't understand anything, we tend to think this exists or it doesn't exist. So it's the same. Buddhists are no different. They're like, oh yeah, now I actually understand how things are. No, you don't understand anything, because you're exactly doing the same precise thing of like before, like I am Italian, and now no, I'm nothing. No, that's not. It's not that before I was Italian and I really believed that I was Italian. Now I'm nothing. That does not exist anymore. Ayasoma. So clearly there is something that is dependently arisen. So before, the Italian definition was dependently arisen, and now the Italian American, that is not Italian American like Dante J is, but this new form of zero generation of Italian American is dependently arisen from different actions that were done in the past. So was I very different 15 years ago from now, before coming to the United States? Wow, yes, absolutely, very different. But, having spent quite a long time in Italy, even though now maybe very radically different being, I still have an accent that is dependently arisen from the actions I did, or that person did back in the day. That was dependently arisen from all of those conditions. Or the fact that perhaps, I still like pretty things, has to do with different actions that I have done in the past. And these days, I don't obsess about pretty things in the world, or most of them anyway, except for Buddha statues. I really like pretty Buddha statues. But other than that, I don't go and like, oh, look at this, beautiful architecture, or this beautiful design, or this beautiful dress, or this beautiful everything, right? So, but there is still a tendency of the mind that goes towards there, because for definitely most of this, what we call current life that we remember, I definitely practice that a lot more than I practice renunciation, a lot more than I practice relinquishment, a lot more than I practice contentment. Another thing that is dependently arisen is that you might think that right now I'm angry. If you're American, I am not. They would just speak very like this, it's the vipaka of being Italian. Nobody in Italy thought I was angry. They just know, we got a kick when we speak. So that is a vipaka. So even though I have the passport American, it doesn't match this vipaka because it's dependently arisen from actions done in the past. So yeah, hope that answered your 3-part questions.
That was great. And you also answered the next question.
Oh.
This one says, what is the most effective practice for understanding dependent origination? You actually just gave an overview.
Yeah.
That was pretty good. Wow.
2 for 1.
Yeah. Hasanta says, can monks who are enlightened discuss that amongst themselves? Yes, just not with lay people. Mm-hmm. But we can discuss it amongst ourselves. That's correct.
Yeah, there's actually Bodhi and Isidasi that how the Isidasi Sutta poem in the Trigata starts exactly. I'm like, oh, you're so awesome. Yeah, you're so awesome too. Like, tell me your story of how you're so awesome. It's actually quite great.
And Christina says, what do you think of Jnana Vira Tera's explanation of dependent origination not happening in the span of 3 lifetimes? I happen to incline more to his view on the subject. So I'm going to refer to my preceptor, Ajahn Pasano. He said that dependent origination has scale invariance. In other words, it is equally observable at every scale of time. So whether you're looking at it in terms of 3 lifetimes or 1 lifetime or 3 seconds or 1/10 of a second or 100 million lifetimes, on every scale, you will see exactly the same thing, which is dependent origination. Anyway, a book I found really useful on this, by the way, was Ajahn Buddhadasa's book, Practical Dependent Origination. That was the book where I first really started to feel like I started to get a grasp on what dependent origination was talking about. Jay Lyles asks, what is the question that you wish people would ask about the Dhamma, but they rarely or never do?
A good question. That question.
Yeah, that question is very interesting. I don't know. I really think that people ask really good questions. And actually, even when they ask the same question over and over again, I think it's great. I did that too. I always do that also. Because sometimes I'm like, I thought I actually had understood this, but maybe not. Let me ask it again. So it's good. Keep it going.
I wish people would ask, how can I be nicer to other people?
Oh.
Because people are always like, how can I develop samadhi? How can I develop stream entry? How can I do this? How can I do that? And I'm like, dude, you're a jerk. Maybe you should start with ground 1 before you start trying to do ground 348. That's what I think anyway. I don't normally say that out loud, but I think it a lot. Yeah, start with being nice to people. If you want to attain anything whatsoever in Buddhism, start with being nice to people. So I actually wish people would ask, how can I be nicer? That would be a great. Many people need to ask that question and don't. Oh, and I always love it when people want to talk about emptiness, but that's kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum.
Bhante Jane?
No, nothing comes to mind.
Okay. And Rick says, I know some Dhamma sites have lists of important Dhamma teachings that link to related talks, studies, and meditations. Can Rick Thorne create a similar webpage for the Buddhist Insights site? Yes, Rick Thorne. I am very happy that you are volunteering to create such a page for our website. That's very kind of you.
Voluntold.
Yep.
Voluntold with Buddhist Insights with Bhante Siddhasa. Well, actually, anyone who wants to volunteer to do all these like great projects is very welcome to write an email to the monastery. We're actually in the week where we're organizing many things. So yeah, it's great, good Kamma opportunity for both the people online and the people in flesh.
Okay. And Hasanta asks, the concept of karma makes sense to me, but I have never understood why giving to an enlightened being is better than the same to a murderer you didn't know was one. If mind is the forerunner, only the motive should matter, not the recipient's qualities, surely?
It's a good question. It's a tough question. What I would say is, though, when you are giving to, what was it? Was it to the first one, to an enlightened being? When you're giving to like an arahant, what you're doing is, when you're giving to, like, this is why the Buddha says, like, giving to the arahants, giving to the Buddha and the disciples, etc. What you're doing there is you're actually being a small part of what keeps the Dhamma alive in the world for the betterment of all beings, right? So there's that extra level there of supporting that. And I think that is kind of where that extra beneficial comes in terms of, giving to those kind of beings as opposed to giving to somebody. I mean, the Buddha is basically giving to anybody is of benefit. Even, the Buddha gives a list, and even at the bottom, it's like animals, but it's still giving to animals is a benefit, right? So, giving to somebody is a benefit. But if you are like a Buddhist person and you want to, this is why I encourage like people like in America and non-Buddhist places is like, if you want the Dhamma to grow in your country, well, you need to, support people who are sharing the Dhamma and trying to grow it in the country. Right? Because then you are actually, you're not just going to a monastery and giving a meal. You're actively supporting the Dhamma growing and lasting and living in your country. Right? It makes a huge difference. So that would be my take on why giving to an awakened being would be more beneficial.
Yeah. Another thing that comes to mind is also the affinity of mind that we are creating. So the affinity towards the Sangha, the affinity towards enlightenment, the affinity towards the cessation of suffering. So all of these are extremely powerful. The other things is also how we are giving. So giving to not only that we're actually giving this to someone, but how the manner that the offering is made. So, there's lots of different ways the Buddha says that lots of different reasons why we can give. Maybe, someone is just hungry, so you give them food, or maybe someone is, maybe it's just a tradition, a family tradition. So we give to, the monastic Sangha because it's just something that our parents were doing and our grandparents and our great grandparents and so forth. Maybe it's just a custom that we do. But really, like what we want to develop is this beautiful quality of mind, the ornament of mind of understanding, generosity. And so the Sangha is also a field of merit in that sense, like that it creates those grounds for us to focus simply on nourishing this quality of an ornament of mind in the mind. And also the more we are gracious in our giving, the more that we have these beautiful qualities as we are supporting the Sangha and create this affinity, then of course, members of the Sangha will gravitate immediately towards really great lay disciples who are pleasant, who have created all these beautiful qualities. So one will have more access towards the teachings. So that's a vipaka of your karma right there. So of course, all of this, like one act has so many different other implications than just giving an object and just having that intention in your mind of giving an object.
So remember that question before about what do you wish people would ask more? I wish people would ask Rick's question coming up more. It's an amazing question.
We have another
questions
question
before
first.
that. But that's my answer to that other question.
So J. Lyle says, was the Buddha and the Sangha of his day vegetarian? So some Sangha members were vegetarian and some were not. The Buddha did not require vegetarianism. So some of them would eat meat and some would not. As for the Buddha himself, we actually don't know. There's nowhere in the suttas where it actually directly states whether or not Shakyamuni Buddha ate meat. So that's a question mark. In the Theravada text, it just doesn't say. Yeah.
But there is Buddha Vipassi that in the Theravada texts does actually eat meat. And there's a Brahmin who goes and tells a Brahmin, I think. Anyway, someone who goes up to him and tells him how it's completely despicable that there is a monastic, someone who's supposed to be pure, that is actually doing such a bad deed of eating meat. And Buddha Vipassi there is quite clear that it was completely blameless, that actually the act of eating meat per se is not an act of bad karma, but rather the means through which one obtains the meat. That is what has a karmic implication. And because Buddha Vipassi had obtained the meal through alms round, so by doing pindapata, then it was completely blameless. There was no nothing wrong with that. And it's not by not eating meat or that we become pure. And it's also not by eating meat that we are destroying ourselves, essentially. But rather it's how are we obtaining it. There's different levels of karmic implications.
Okay, and then the question which excited Bante J, Rick says, sometimes practice can be difficult and demanding. What are ways you have found helpful towards bringing a spirit of play, fun, or delight to the practice?
I say this kind of stuff a lot. I want to hear what for the two of you. I'll respond too, but I want to hear what you guys would say first.
Smile, relax. Don't take yourself too seriously, and don't worry how quick your progress is. Just relax and stick with it. Smile, relax, be nice to people. Don't take yourself too seriously. That's my recommendations.
Sometimes practice can be difficult and demanding. What are ways you have found helpful towards bringing a spirit of play, fun, or delight to the practice? I'm actually always having fun with them. I'm delighted. I love it. Actually, the more I'm a monastic, the happier I am. I was talking to somebody at Mexico today. Like, I'm like, oh, this is great. I'm having fun. What is difficult and demanding is actually like running a monastery. That's more. So I will rephrase. What have you found helpful towards bringing a spirit of play, fun, or delight to the practice? To do, unfortunately, and I say unfortunately because it's not unfortunate, but it's unfortunate because it still somewhat kind of irritates me. But like what Bhaktisiddhanta encourages me to do, just relax. So usually when someone tells me to relax, when I'm not relaxed, it irritates me a bit. But when I actually manage to do it, just relax, then I'm like, okay, yeah, it's fun. It's good. Also laughing at myself. Like when I'm grumpy, like when there is like, oh, I hate this, I don't like this, I don't want this, it has to stop. Like, then I just start laughing at myself. It's like so ridiculous. The mind always, goes back into the same habits, etc. And then I'm quite lucky that I have really good spiritual companions. So when I'm going through those phases, they laugh with me, and nobody takes each other too seriously. And we understand that it's something that is temporary and subject to change. And Bante J.
So I guess for me, like one of the things in life that I've always tried to do is kind of not lose my inner child. So in many ways, I'm like a big kid. And one of the things that kids have that we kind of lose is curiosity for the world around us. And as a practitioner, especially if you want to practice like Satipatthana, that curiosity is very, very important, right? The 7 factors of awakening. The first is mindfulness. Right? And when you become mindful, you see things that you haven't seen before. You get curious and you want to investigate them, right? So if you understand, if you take the mindset of like, well, what am I going to experience today? What can I investigate? Like this mindset is similar to like my preceptor Bante G. He said something like, if the breath is boring, you're doing it wrong. Right. And for years I didn't get it. And then I got it. And it was because for me, I just thought the breath was the breath and I was just, okay, well, what else is there? But there was a deeper level that I wasn't paying attention to, that I couldn't see. And then I could, right? So there's so much. You could literally spend a whole day chasing after and investigating what you're experiencing in your mind and body. You could do it. And then you start to observe how that your mind is like the best entertainment. Right? And that's really when you start to just laugh at yourself. It's like, Jesus, what is going on in this silly mind? Right. And then that's where you get like what Bante and I were saying is like not taking yourself too seriously. But I think having that curiosity, that kind of childlike curiosity and desire for, to playing with your practice. Right. Let me try this now. Let me try that. Let me do trial and error. Like that's the word I was trying to remember like 20, 30 minutes ago. Right. Let me investigate. And so when you have that, it's never boring when you're just like, oh, okay, now I got to go and sit down for a half hour. No, it's like, oh, wow, this is interesting. Let me see what I can see. Let me try to, what is going to come into my mind today, right? What wackiness, what kind of silly thoughts, like who am I going to, envision killing today? And who am I going to envision doing all kinds of things so that I can just be like, whoa, this is funny. Let me laugh at this, right? Those of the people who've listened to me talk will know that I bring up the Bhante Silananda Metta retreat situation there. Not enough time for that story, but
I don't know that story.
Just for the record, one of our rules is that we can't own weapons.
But if you're good with your hands, then
Anyway, so Saturn of Legal says, is it better to let go in breathing and go with automated breath versus forceful breathing? There are different ways of doing breath meditation. And although most teachers will say that it's better to let the body breathe on its own, there are some teachers who teach controlled breathing. But I don't teach breath meditation at all. So my recommendation is actually not to do breath meditation and just to focus on mindfulness of the body, especially if you have problems with getting anxious about your breathing, then just don't do breath meditation. So also, if you get into this thing of like, should I control it? Should I not control it? Well, then just don't do breath meditation. And then the question disappears. Sud asks, what advice would you recommend for expectant parents? How can one make sure their future expected child be endowed with virtuous conduct? Can parents share their merits with their children?
Oh, how beautiful. What a beautiful aspiration. So yeah, how can one make sure will have virtuous conduct? Well, you can't really make sure, but you can try your best. And give your child the opportunity to learn the Dhamma, to be exposed to the Dhamma immediately. One of the things that really I find mind-boggling in Western circles, and actually it's just more of a recent development. At the very beginning, I was kind of like, oh, how interesting, how open-minded, parents are, like, the new Buddhist parents in the West, that usually they don't bring their children to the monastery, even though they're practicing Buddhism, because they want the child to pick their religion, the religion they like when they are old enough to make that decision, etc., etc. I was like, oh, this is really great. Yeah, instead of forcing. And I was like, what a really terrible idea. It's kind of like if you have access to like fresh spring mountain water full of minerals, and then you're like, let me actually, everybody's there drinking Coke and like whatever, like soda and blah, blah. They can like, have that or die dehydrated in the meanwhile. And then, they can make the decision when they're older to like drink water and like actually energize them, get something that is really vital that removes their thirst. Anyway, not perhaps the best example, but point being is like, why would you deprive your child of something so vital that brings towards a cessation of suffering when you have it available? So my suggestion and encouragement would be expose them straight away to the Dhamma, bring them to the monastery. There's a saying in Thailand, I think that goes something along the lines, I'm going to butcher it, but like a young piece of wood bends easily. The one that is old is difficult to bend. So that's so very true to the mind. I so wished my parents were Buddhist and had brought me to the temple, and I had ordained very young. It would be so great, instead of wasting all of the precious years where my body was actually functioning properly, doing all sorts of crazy things that I did with my life. I would have actually been able to, really eradicate suffering. It's okay. I'm trying to do it right now, but it's a bit of an impediment having this malfunctioning thing right now.
And Dea says, how is the responsibility when it comes to habits and more automatic actions? I don't see much intentions within them, almost like how one acts within a dream if one isn't mindful.
I think this is related to what I was saying earlier. Yeah.
How would you respond to that, Bhante?
Well,
so there's still intention operating. And also, if you're choosing to not pay attention to your own actions, then that's also a choice. That's the choice to be negligent. And the choice to be negligent of your own actions is actually very bad karma. So instead, make the choice to pay attention to your actions and then make the choice to choose wholesome actions. Habits and seemingly automatic actions, those still have intention behind them and they still generate karma, right? Because they're not happening automatically all by themselves. You're still doing something. So it still generates karma. And the fact that you're not paying attention to them and not trying to control them is also generating karma. So sorry, there's no easy out here.
Yeah, and I think it's the product of delusion, which actually the Buddha says that it's extremely harmful and blameful. So yeah, that's what comes with automatic actions. They're not automatic. It seems like automatic because we have built such a strong habit that it feels automatic. It's kind of like, if you cook, for example, like my mom. Well, actually, these days she kind of forgot how to cook, but that's a bad example. But, before all her life, essentially, if she would make pasta sauce, it was very automatic. She just knew how to put the ingredients. But you couldn't say that, she's not making the action of like cooking the sauce. It's just that she had made that sauce so many million different times that like she could do it with her eyes closed while doing something else, and it just came into being. So there is actually an intentional action that is happening right there. It's not automatic in the way that it deprives our responsibility. There is a choice, but it's just so strong that that happens very quickly, very fast, as opposed to new choices. We usually kind of are a little bit more hesitant. We're a little bit more intentionally taking some time because we don't know what to do, right? If we're like strangers in a city, we're like, let me read the signs. Where is this? Where is that? As opposed to if you're in the city, the town, wherever you're from, you're kind of going there in automatic, but you're still making intentional actions.
Yeah. And Jay Sohi says, if a mosquito lands on me, is it good to want the mosquito to go away? If so, how best to approach this issue? Also, what about with any other potentially annoying pests? So I recommend looking at the mosquito with all the kindness in your heart and say, hello, little friend mosquito. Please go away without biting me, little friend mosquito. That's what I recommend. So having metta for a being doesn't mean that you need to let it bite you.
And Jay Kala says that the Buddha died from eating pork in the suttas, but...
That's actually not for sure. So we know that the Buddha ate something that resulted in his death, but scholars have debated for 2,500 years just what the heck it was that the Buddha actually ate. So one theory is that it was pork, but that theory is not confirmed. Another prevalent theory is that it was a mushroom.
This is funny.
Dale says, donating to murderer versus to enlightened being. Angulimala be like, yes.
That's a funny Buddhist joke.
It's funny.
That is quite funny. Yeah.
Let's see. Kumu says, I did the same with my son and it was a terrible idea, like what Americans do, give them the choice. But thankfully now he has embraced the teachings. Great. Without the rituals, though. Hey, hey, 50% is better than 0.
Yeah.
At least he's practicing part of the Dhamma. That's good. And that's the last of the questions from online.
But I just want to make a comment. If you can highlight the thing of Kumu, like what Americans do, give them the choice. I would like to reply with a quote from Ajahn Sumedho. Choice is not happiness.
Definitely in this case.
Yes.
Okay, so that's the end of the questions, and we're also coming to the end of our time. So I think we can go ahead and conclude at this time with 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And we'll see you all next time.